Welcome to the School Transportation Association of Indiana training. In this lesson, we'll be talking about safe bus stop procedures. Now, when you look at transportation and loading and unloading, it is the moment of truth in our industry because typically, if a kid is going to lose their life, it is going to happen at the bus stop. Rarely does a vehicle come out of anywhere and just hit a school bus. It does happen, but it's rare. But typically, if a kid is going to be injured or if there's a loss of life, it is going to happen at the bus stop. Now, majority of kids that are killed around school buses are killed within the danger zone. And the most dangerous areas of your school bus is the front of the bus and the right quarter, and of course, from passing vehicles. Let's look at the causes of fatalities and injuries at bus stops. In the past 5 or 6 years, the number one killer of kids, whether it's the bus driver or the motoring public, is a distracted or tired driver. Motorists or school bus drivers distracted, cell phone usage, not paying attention, things like that. The next highest is illegal passing, stop arm violations. You have impatient drivers, failing to stop for flashing red lights because they're in a rush, things like that. Then danger zone blind spots. And this is going to happen because the mirrors were not properly adjusted or just failure to scan the mirrors. And remember, as a school bus driver, you should be scanning your mirrors every 15 to 18 seconds when you're driving, but also when you're loading and unloading students, you should be constantly checking those mirrors. Unsafe stop placement. Placed in dangerous location, high-speed roads, and blind spots. And the reality is, there are some roads where you just can't get away from picking up and dropping off kids because that's the only way you can get them is where they're at. But one thing to keep in mind, if you do have concerns about stops, things like that, bring it to the attention of the school district. You can't fix something, they can't fix something if they don't know about it. Improper school bus operations, and this is improper training, making errors because there's no follow-up training, things like that. So I know traveling throughout the state of Indiana, there's a lot of school districts that do refresher training, those type of things. But then there's some districts that probably don't do none at all. So a lot of times when you look at improper school bus operations, it is because of improper training, but also there's some drivers out there that just want to do things their way, which causes a lot of problems as well. And then poor visibility, weather, adverse conditions, snow, ice, fog, glare from the sun, bright lights. Living here in the great state of Indiana, we can see in one week, rain, snow, sleet, tornadoes, fog, all of it at one time. And then something else we have to take into account as well is our time. You know, um, with our time changes that we typically have, just when some of you guys are able to see kids, what do? We change the time and then plunge them back into darkness. So that's something else that we have to take into account as well. So when you look at school bus crashes, and you look at this crash right here where the train hits the back of the bus, and that happened in Florida, and that's just a bus driver not following proper procedures. This happened in New Jersey where a school bus driver tried to do a turnaround on the highway on 95. And if you ever driven 95 uh, in New Jersey or going up the East Coast, I mean, the speed limit may be 70, but that is not what people were doing. And why this bus driver tried to make a U-turn is beyond me. This is an accident that happened not too long ago where a school bus driver, the preliminary reports say they wasn't paying attention. They sideswipe a truck, and unfortunately, two students lost their lives. And then this one here, an SUV ran into a school bus while the school bus was transiting. So, some of these things are our fault. Some of these things are the motoring public not paying attention. But this is the reason why you have to make sure you're constantly scanning your mirrors and paying attention before you load and unload students. All right, so let's talk about the proper procedures for loading and unloading. And one thing that I want to stress with regards to these procedures, these are the procedures that in a fatality or a serious accident, when the state police show up to do an investigation, they want to know, did you go through these steps? So that's why we're going to walk through and just talk about how would you properly load and unload a child. So the first thing you have to do is clear your mind. I can't stress that enough. When you are going through your pre-trip, whatever type of pre-trip your school district has you do, you want to make sure you're also transitioning where your only thoughts is that school bus, those students, and picking them up, dropping them off, and getting them to school safely. All of us have things that we worry about in our lives. We're all going through something. We may be worrying about something. But the reality is, when you're driving that school bus and you're picking up and dropping off kids, God forbid a kid get hurt, the parent don't care what's going on in your life. All they care about is were you worried about my child when you were picking them up and dropping them off. I tell bus drivers all the time, it doesn't matter how much your district loves you, how much the kids love you, how much the parents love you. If you hurt a child on that school bus because you weren't paying attention, you become public enemy number one. So you want to make sure you're following your procedures. So students should always stand at least 10 feet away from the school bus stop. But in a perfect world, you would have them at least 20 feet away. That would definitely keep them out of harm's way. But at a minimum, 10 feet. Students should always be waiting at the bus stop before the bus arrives at its scheduled time. There should be no horseplay at the bus stop. Now, even though that's the bus stop, it's still your responsibility as a school bus driver to make sure those kids know what the procedures are at the bus stop. And then also, try to correct any problems that you see. And it may have to go, to your transportation office so they can talk to the parents and fix it. Drivers should only pick up and drop off at district designated bus stops. So you have to run your route the way it is written. That doesn't mean you can't go to your router and say, there's a better way for me to pick up this particular child, but you always want to make sure you're running that route the way it's supposed to be written. Now, there are certain situations like a water main break, or maybe there's an emergency situation with fire, police, where you have to adjust your route on the fly. Anybody can understand that. But you want to make sure you're running your route as your corporation has written that route out to be run. Give adequate warning with your amber student warning lights. Now, the state does not give you a specific number of how far you have to activate those student warning lights, because that's going to change from roadway to roadway. If you were picking up on US 31, you would probably give 1,000 feet of notice that you're getting ready to pick up a child. Whereas if you're picking up in a neighborhood, you may only give 200 feet of notice. Now, the state school bus committee's recommendation is 200 to 500 feet. But again, that's just a recommendation. You will get a feel for how much distance you have to give to let the public know that you're about to load and unload students. Bring the bus to a complete stop before engaging the stop arm. There have been reports where bus drivers are driving with their stop arm out, and that is illegal. You have to come to a complete stop. All right, secure your bus, and then open your door and engage your stop arm. Now, when you're stopped, we recommend, and industry standards recommend, that you utilize the neutral park brake method. But again, that is just a recommendation. It is not mandatory unless it's required by school district policy. And make sure all traffic has stopped before loading. Now you want to ensure that your AM FM radio is low or off completely to hear any last second warnings. Student crossing the street should always be signaled, loaded, and unloaded prior to any other students loading or unloading. When you think about crossers in the morning, they have the most dangerous way to go because they have to cross probably in the dark to get on the school bus. So they should always be the priority to get across first. Now, one issue that a lot of times bus drivers run into is if you have crossers in the morning and they're already on the other side before you got there, hanging out with the other kids, you want to make sure you let them know, hey, you don't cross that road until I get there. Students should never board the bus or cross the street unless signaled to do so by the driver. And all drivers in the district must use the same hand signal to let students know when to load or to cross. And before leaving the bus stop, again, listen for any last second warnings. One thing you want to be aware of, do kids have things dangling off their backpacks, things like that. And every kid boarding your school bus should always use the handrail getting on and off the school bus. Now, afternoon runs are the most dangerous. Majority of kids killed getting on and off school buses. This typically happens in the afternoon. And it makes sense because traffic is different, the kids are different, and you're different. So students crossing the road at the bus stop should be held on the bus until all traffic has come to a complete stop. And in the afternoons, you're going to make the same approach, the same distances like you did in the morning. And in a perfect world, definitely your crossers would get off that bus first to cross because they have the most dangerous way to go. So students or crossers should go out at least 12 feet out to the right convex mirror, make eye contact with the bus driver, you give them the signal to cross, and they cross the road, get to your left convex mirror, look both ways, and if it's safe, continue on across. Now, when crossing the road, again, you want to make sure that they're looking, paying attention, um, and make sure your district policy designates how those kids are going to cross. State law dictates, your lighting, your loading, your unloading, things like that, but also you have to know what your school district policy is as well. Count your students leaving the school bus. Always count your kids, whether it's crossers or kids staying on that side. Always count your kids. We have had situations here in the United States where bus drivers didn't count their kids or they lost count. They start to pull off, and next thing you know, they're hitting a child or running one over. So you always want to make sure you're counting your kids. Before departing the stop, scan your mirrors and check your stairwell. Always make sure you check your stairwell to verify that a kid is not reaching in to grab something or things like that. Drivers should continuously reinforce proper crossing procedures, and drivers should report any bus stop that they consider to be unsafe. So when you look at a good example of a bus stop at an intersection, you always want to make sure that you stop short of that intersection. So for any cars that are turning towards you, they have enough room to make it on there and understand exactly what you're doing. Also, something to keep in mind is cross traffic, like in this slide, cross traffic does not have to stop for your stop arm. So you look at this bad example, the bus is all the way to the corner. So by the time that car makes a turn, if they're not paying attention, they're already at your stop arm. So if you had kids crossing to get to that other side where the bus is at, you could see they would be placed in danger in that situation. So that's one where if you feel like a stop is too dangerous or you don't really know how you should load or unload that unload that child, talk to the transportation professionals in your office and they will give you guidance. Again, when you look at the intersection, if you're turning off an intersection, make sure you give enough distance where cars that are turning onto that roadway can clearly see that the bus is stopped and picking up and dropping off students. So when you look at the summary, you want to make sure again, any operations you're doing on that bus, whether it's morning runs, afternoon runs, field trips, sporting events, always clear your mind. Always clear your mind. Train students on proper loading and unloading procedures. That is your responsibility. And I always tell bus drivers that if you get to the elementary, middle, or high school 10 minutes before dismissal, 5 minutes before dismissal, plan training for your students. Stand up and tell them, hey, we're going to talk about proper loading and unloading procedures. Because when you teach them right, especially as kindergartners, first grade, second graders, those kids are eventually going to be, your ninth graders, 10th graders, 11th graders, and they already know the proper procedures. Avoid distractions. Review your procedures. Make sure you know district policy and state laws. Run your route as written and report any unsafe stops. This concludes the School Transportation Association of Indiana training on proper bus stops.